European Commission officials and senior Indian ministers are meeting for the first time ever for a trade and technology summit. Two of the world's largest democracies will be keen to boost cooperation on everything from artificial intelligence to digital governance to climate-saving technologies. The EU is playing catch-up on tech partnership with India. The US has already a similar forum. And Brussels will have to navigate thorny trade issues, such as a planned levy on foreign businesses selling their carbon-intensive wares within the 27-country bloc. For more, let's bring in DW correspondent Rosie Birchard in Brussels and Charu Kartikeya in Delhi. Rosie, let me start with you. Tell us more on why the EU is so keen on holding this summit.
Well, it's no secret that Brussels is very much on the lookout for new partners. And this is the first meeting of this format, so it's also an opportunity for high-level Indian and EU politicians to get some face time in. Now, these are two big democracies with big ambitions, and on their agenda, according to EU officials I've been speaking to, they'll be discussing cooperation on digital technologies, so high-performance computing, a cooperation and exchange on semiconductors, even on waste management. So, of course, there's some big point here, which is that the EU has advanced research and innovation and technology industries. So does India, but where India is really ahead is when it comes to workforce and manufacturing capacities. So if you speak to some business leaders and groups, they'll say, well, this is simply a match made in heaven and a very attractive opportunity for the EU to pursue from a business perspective.
Charu, over to you in Delhi. What does India want to get out of this?
Well, it's generally seen as an attempt to, yet another attempt rather, to deepen the trade relationship between India and Europe. Now, Chris, we all know that talks for a free trade agreement between India and European Union have been going on for several years now. In fact, they were stuck. The talks were stalled for several years, but they've been recently renewed, and India is very keen to see those talks through. In fact, Foreign Minister Jaishankar, who's there in Brussels right now, has said that this will be a game changer if the free trade agreement could come across. So essentially, India is keen to deepen its trade relationship with the European Union, and especially in these areas of technology and trade. Therefore, this council was set up, and it was announced last year during Ursula von der Leyen's visit to India. Chris.
Rosie, back to you in Brussels. As much as both sides want to sell this as a feel-good moment, there are differences. A major one is the EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism. Tell us more on that.
You're right, it's not all happy families here. And the EU is on a big mission, it says, to try and make polluters pay. So as climate policies get more strict within the European Union, there are fears of what's called carbon leakage. And that's where businesses would simply relocate carbon-intensive production outside of the EU, where there are less stringent policies in order to cut costs. So the European Union has pioneered new policies to try and cut down on that by essentially making it more expensive to import carbon-intensive goods, for example, cement, steel, and that is raising a big bone of contention between these two sides.
Charu, why is this so much of an issue for the Indian government?
Oh, India is really wary of it. In fact, it is almost looking. India is almost looking at this as a trade barrier. India's point is that this law is going to increase the cost for India's exporters, and especially of exporters of energy-intensive products. You know, there's steel, there's aluminium, there's cement, there's fertilizers. So there are a lot of products and a lot of exporters which will be affected. Their prices are going to go up. India has said that this is unfair, and many analysts feel that this might even force Indian exporters to look at other markets where such taxes do not exist. So it's almost a very threatening sort of a clause for the trade relationship between the two partners.
Charu, if this mechanism is such a touchy issue for the Indian side, what are officials then making of the EU's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, saying in an interview that the bloc should crack down on India reselling Russian oil into Europe as refined fuel?
Well, Chris, India is yet to respond to that, and we are yet to see if Joseph Borrell is personally going to take this up with Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar yet. But it is being believed that Borrell's statement is more about EU importers than about India, because if you look at his statements closely, he has said that if the Indians sell, it is because someone here is buying, and we have to look at who is buying. So it looks like Borrell is largely addressing importers in EU who buy processed crude oil, and which Borrell suspects, or EU suspects, that India is coming out of the crude that India has been buying from Russia.
Rosie, back to you in Brussels. As the EU wants to de-risk but not decouple from China, is India likely to function as an alternative, equally important trade partner?
Well, as I said, India is seen as an attractive partner here in Europe, but not only for those reasons I mentioned, but simply because, for the simple reason that it is not China. Brussels is trying to diversify its supply chains away from dependencies on Beijing, and I think India certainly will be part of that, although that relationship Brussels has with Beijing is so extensive, it's unlikely that India is going to be able to replace those supply chains in all areas. For example, the EU is looking to North America when it comes to replacing supplies of critical raw materials. Now, both sides say they want to move ahead here, but there are no breakthrough expected when it comes to that free trade agreement that Charu mentioned. So if they wanted to deepen ties even further, that would be a next step, which is not expected to be any sort of a breakthrough or any sort of a big move on that front at Tuesday's talks.
DW correspondents Rosie Birchard in Brussels and Charu Kartikeya in Delhi. Thanks to you both.